sports, particularly here, the Department of Science and Innovation. We're having our meeting today with them, briefing where. Welcome, Minister. Is the Minister in the meeting?
Yes, I am, Chair. I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. Yep. As you can see, my video is not very well, so it doesn't help having it here. So I'm going to switch it off so that we can continue with our briefing. Our members, as you know, that the Department of Science and Innovation, there are no MECs who deal with these issues in the provinces, so that this briefing actually helps us to do oversight with institutions that are in our provinces, but at the same time, it's meant for us to share information and know what is happening in the department, and also when people, so that when we engage with the electorate, with the people within the sector, we should be having this information where we help in one, amongst others, sharing information with our constituencies and with other relevant bodies. With those few words, I'll give over to the Minister to open. Oh, we need to first start with the agenda for the meeting. Noltando, will you flag the agenda for the meeting? I'm in such a hurry that we should do this because there's the agenda. Are there additions on this agenda? If none, can anyone move for adoption of the agenda?
Nzube adopt, Chairperson.
Nzube moves. Any seconder?
I second.
No, thank you very much. Yep. And then are there apologies? None. Okay. Let's move on to I've already opened the meeting and say what the meeting is all about. Today we'll be getting the report on postgraduate funding for the STEM careers, innovation programs to boost careers in science and innovation, new technology and innovation linked to sanitation in schools. Yeah, those will be the briefings, honorable members. May I give over to the Minister to brief us?
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
Sorry, Chair, my apologies. Yes, Chair, there is an apology from the Deputy Minister. He won't be able to join us today because he is abroad on official business. Thank you, Chair.
Fine. No, thanks. That is in order. Yeah. Honorable Minister, may you take us through the brief? Let's say this meeting, we've got to end this meeting by 11:30, because as a committee, we have other programs to deal with after this meeting. Over to you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Nchabeleng. And let me also greet all the honorable members and other participants in this meeting. Chair, I didn't hear my apology being read because today I have a clash, which is not ideal. I have both the Portfolio Committee in the National Assembly and the Select Committee in the NCOP. Now, given the nature of the issues we are dealing with today at the Portfolio Committee, which is the governance problems at some of our universities, I had requested that after I had introduced my team led by the DG, I would then request that I be released just before 11 to go and join the Portfolio Committee, which is physical here in Cape Town, Chair. Let me upfront beg for your indulgence on this, and that I will excuse myself. Then I will leave you in the capable hands of the DG, at least to respond to issues. At least I'm very pleased, Chair, that I'm here to introduce the issues before yourselves. And I'm indeed very delighted that we are having this meeting shortly after we had made our policy statement in the NCOP last week. And I would like to thank you and members of the Portfolio Committee who participated in the debate, and also the support that we continue to receive from this committee, albeit unnecessarily so, not uncritical support, but support that is honest, which helps us to sharpen our own strategies in driving an agenda for transforming the sector. Chair, today we've been requested, I will try and be brief in the introduction, given the fact that you have only about 1.5 hours for this whole session. And I wouldn't like to take too much time from the DG's presentation. We've been asked to focus on postgraduate funding for the STEM careers, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics careers. Also to focus on innovation programs to boost careers in science innovation. Thirdly, we've been asked to talk about new technology and innovation that can assist in provision for proper sanitation in schools. And fourthly, how the DSI initiates, maintains, and sustains corporate and other funders' support. As I have said, I have here a team led by the DG who will be presenting quite extensively on these 4 subjects. But let me just highlight a few things by way of background and an overview. On postgraduate funding for the STEM careers, Chair, I would just like to highlight the following: that as a department, we implement our postgraduate funding programs for STEM careers through the National Research Foundation, the NRF. I'm also delighted to report to you today that the 2021 academic year marked the first full year of the implementation of the DSI National Research Foundation full cost of study support for 3 categories of postgraduate students. In other words, we are now funding fully, not partly. More than 2/3 of first-time funded postgraduate students received full cost of study support as the policy is progressively introduced to new cohorts of postgraduate students at all levels. The NRF accounts for 95% of the total annual postgraduate students supported through Program 4, which is one of our strategic programs within the department. 5% of this money for supporting postgraduate students goes to funding STEM careers in the Agricultural Research Council, which is a fellow-sized council, to our agency, the South African National Space Agency, and to our Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. So we've got postgraduate bursaries dedicated for people associated with these institutions. In this regard, I would like to highlight that in 2021-2022, the DSI supported a total of 5,643 honors and master's students and 2,527 PhD students, in line with our equity targets of race, gender, and nationality set in the new DSI NRF postgraduate funding policy. I would like to say, Chair, that those who argue that equity targets are no longer relevant and that they are discriminatory, they just don't understand the nature of the challenge, or they deliberately want to fudge the nature of the challenge that we are faced with. More than 3 centuries of colonialism and an apartheid regime from 1948 to 1994 caused enormous damage in terms of science capabilities, science opportunities, educational opportunities for South Africans, and so on. Those who are saying we must now end these things, in fact, are the ones often who were privileged in the past, and the impact of their accumulated advantages still continue to actually have a South Africa that is having racial inequalities and gender inequalities, even discriminatory practices. So as this government, we are very committed to actually continue chasing equity targets, because we can't build a non-racial and a non-sexist society when we still have the continued reproduction of the old colonial and apartheid patterns. In this area of science and innovation, for instance, we still have some areas where there are hardly any Black South Africans and there are hardly any Black women South Africans who are effectively participating in this. So in our postgraduate funding then, the numbers we are talking about included students who were granted extended support for their postgraduate studies following the disruptions caused by COVID-19. The DSI has set a target of awarding 12,000 PhD bursaries in the 2019 to 2024 MTF, in other words, during the period of the current administration. And by June 2022, we had supported 7,253 PhD students. So we do expect to meet our target of 12,000. The department also aimed to support 24,000 pipeline students, honors and masters in the MTF period. I just want to indicate that we've also conducted something very important, a tracer study, which has not been done before in South Africa. We'll share you these results as soon as they are available. Between the year 2000 and 2018, on the mobility, career paths, and other attributes of PhD students who graduated from South African universities, as I said, between 2000 and 2018, as well as 2018, from the year 2000 to year 2018. Just to say, where are these PhD graduates? What are they doing? Where have they been absorbed in the economy and all that? We funded this study, which is managed by the Water Research Commission. On innovation, very briefly, Chair, I want to say that there are strategic innovation competencies that should be developed and enhanced to develop careers in science. Our white paper has identified some key areas in this regards, and some of them are contained in the National Biotechnology Strategy, which initiated the development of technologies and associated technologies and products that would address science-based needs in the health, industrial, and agricultural sectors of the economy. A key aspect of this new strategy is coordination. Both industry and government have research, development, and innovation needs which are required to maintain a competitive edge and ensure efficient service delivery. These will be covered extensively by the DG. Let me not say anything more about this in view of your time, Chair. On new technology and innovation that can assist in the provision of proper sanitation in schools, we are very proud that as the Department of Science and Innovation, in partnership with SALGA and the European Union, we are implementing the viability and validation of innovations for service delivery program, VVISTP as we call it, to demonstrate, pilot, and evaluate the suitability and viability of technologies and innovation that can improve the delivery of basic services, such as water, sanitation, renewable energy, and waste management in our municipalities. 32 municipalities are currently supported through this program. The program, I'm happy to say, is designed to build partnerships between technology developers in publicly funded research institutions and the private sector and municipalities. In other words, as our slogan says, making sure it's possible, we also want to make sure that supporting local government development through science is indeed possible. We are also implementing, as the DSI, by the way, 126 projects and interventions that were selected to support districts responding to the needs for employment, entrepreneurship, economic opportunities for the youth, local economic development, local supplier value chains, and the circular economy. We would be more than happy, Chair, working with yourselves to also help you to visit some of these projects and showcase them so that you are able to engage and see what is it that we are doing. In collaboration with the Water Research Commission, we've established a water technologies demonstration program to pull together the applied research and development and pre-commercialization stages of the water innovation continuum. I don't need to emphasize this more in the light of the cholera challenges, in the light of old water infrastructure, how important scientific interventions are in assisting on this front of water and sanitation. Indeed, our contribution can be traced to the water and sanitation master plan of the Department of Water Affairs. The DG will say something more about this. On the last issue of how the DSI initiates, maintains and sustains corporate and other funders' support, we have introduced the STI budget, Science, Technology and Innovation, STI, budget coordination mechanism in our 2023 budget prioritization framework. A task team consisting of Department of Science and Innovation, National Treasury, and the Department of Performance Monitoring and Evaluation has been established to support the coordination mechanism. In other words, we want to better coordinate, Chair and honorable members, money spent on science, technology, and innovation across departments, so that we don't have parallel programs or even programs that may be running against each other. We want to say we are working with Treasury and DPME. How do we coordinate all monies in government departments that are assigned to science, technology, and innovation, so that we maximize impact? That's one key mechanism through which we are trying to achieve this initiation, maintenance, and sustainability of funding STI. The focus also has been on knowledge utilization for inclusivity programs, which include the Grassroots Innovation Program, the Technology and Acquisition and Deployment Fund, as well as the Living Labs programs and M-Labs. During the current year, financial year, we intend to upscale the implementation of the Innovation Fund, which is another important initiative, Honorable Chair, which is an investment to support the early development and expansion of stages of technology-based South African firms. Indeed, we also have 6 sector innovation funds, which are implemented in different sectors of the economy to actually drive human capacity development and skills, as well as to drive, as part of driving innovation. A sector innovation fund, just to properly define it, is a research development innovation partnership agreement between the DSI and the private sector industry association to incentivize the private sector to increase its investment in research, development, and innovation. Chair, as I move towards ending, we will continue to strengthen our international research and cooperation, which includes our science diplomacy, especially during this year that South Africa is chairing BRICS. Lastly, I would like to indicate that all the work we do is supported by our DSI brand campaign to show how we use science and innovation to support the socio-economic needs of South Africa. As I have said, our tagline, making sure it's possible, captures the essence of the DSI brand, demonstrating the value of national system of innovation in addressing challenges that we face. With these few remarks, Chair, allow me then to call upon the DG and the team to make the presentation. And on my part, Chair, I would request that you release me in the next 15 to 20 minutes to go back to the portfolio committee meeting. And I leave you in the capable hands of our DG and his team. And thank you in advance for your understanding, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Honorable Minister. I was told that you won't be in the meeting. I mean, you'll attend and then leave later. So for me, that apology is accepted. It's accepted, and you are released. Whenever we need you, you always around when we need you. So thank you very much. You are excused. Honorable members, yeah, DG, it's your turn. You may take over the presentation. Continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Honorable Chair and honorable members. We are also delighted. I'll hand over to Mr. Patel, who will take us through the presentation. And I'm sure we should be able to do it by 10 to 5 to at the latest, so there's enough time for engagements. Mr. Patel?
Thanks, DG. Just let me load the presentation. Good morning, honorable members and Minister and DG. The presentation is in 4 parts. So let's just get into the next slide. So the presentation is in 4 parts and will be taken by the officials who are involved in these different matters. So we'll start off by looking at postgraduate funding for STEM careers, which my colleague Becky Khadebe will do with support from Dr. Manzini. And then we'll briefly touch on innovation programs to boost careers in science innovation, including some work that we do on science career guidance. And then we'll have a presentation on our work in sanitation and some of our private sector partnerships, which will be taken forward by colleagues in another program in DSI, and that is program 5, that's responsible for socioeconomic innovation partnerships. DDG Moefe indicated he might be slightly late to join in, but his team is here, and if he's present, he will do the presentation. So I think we have a big and a great number of issues to cover. So without further ado, I would ask Mr. Khadebe to start with the presentation on postgraduate funding for STEM careers. Becky, can you start, and I'll just navigate from my side.
Yeah, please, Imran, can we really ask the colleagues to be aware of the time, right?
Becky?
Thank you so much, Chair, and good morning, colleagues. And
I think Becky, you muted.
No, I'm not muted. I'm not muted. You can't hear me?
I'm not too sure of other people on the platform, but
I can hear you loud and clear.
I'm loud and clear.
Very well. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. I think maybe we'll try and keep to the rate of about 30 seconds per slide, just highlighting a few
Chair,
keys.
I'm not too sure if I'm the only one.
Can other members hear me? I can hear you, Imran. DDG Patel. Can other members hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Yes.
Loud and clear.
You are the only one, DDG Patel, apparently. But I can get feedback from you.
I think that DDG's phone must be muted because we can all hear you.
Yeah. Can I continue meanwhile, maybe hoping that the problem would have been sorted out, because I'm just going to do the first few, I think 13 or 14 slides, and then he will take over. But then there'll be a problem, because then you can't page down, the slides. Maybe. DDG Patel, can you hear me? Maybe I should load it from my side so that I could then move. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, you can. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Colleagues, I'm just going to highlight a few messages per slide. The minister has touched on this, the 95% that we give to the NRF in terms of funding, and also the proportion of 95% that they then fund, and the 5% that we give to, the 3 agencies, Agricultural Research Council and SANZA, and the CSIR, in support of areas priority areas identified by the DSI, but that are aligned, to the respective entities. So can you move to the next slide? Can you scroll through? Yes. So this is just the mandate slide of the NRF. The NRF support research and also researchers through flagship initiatives such as SACHI and COEs, and embedded in that support is also support for postgraduate students. They support research infrastructure and research equipment, of course, postgraduate students, but also the emerging or early career researchers. But also they do a lot of through SASTA, an agency under the NRF, a lot of science engagement activities focusing on education, awareness, and communication. Scroll down, please. Can you go to the next slide? Yes, in 2013, and just recognizing that our resources are very, very limited, we had to come up with a set of guidelines just to ensure that we use our resources smartly, judiciously, and efficiently. Now, these guidelines had a number of principles, the issue of representativity in terms of just the assault on, as the minister said, the apartheid, colonial, and patriarchal legacy, and also improving efficiency in funding, but also prioritizing, set disciplines that are aligned to our national development priorities. But we also build in a number of equity targets. With South Africa largely becoming a postgraduate training destination, largely for countries in the SADC and Africa in particular, but also we host a number of international students. So we had equity targets that talk to nationality. So 80% of the students that we needed to support needed to be of South African origin or hold permanent residence. And then 80% of the 87%, because then the issue of race and gender analysis, we limited that to the South African population. 80% should be Black and 55% should be women. We set a target of 4% in terms of supporting people with disabilities, and then 13% for international students. Can you go, Grace? Next slide. These are just the highlights of how we fed. Not everything, but if you look at 2017 to 2021, the total number of students supported through the NRF, and you look at then the South African Black, South African women, and also on the last column, the intersectionality of race and gender. Maybe one key point to pick up as well is just the decline in the number of supported students from 2020 to 2021. And there's more to come on that. Can you scroll down? Now, the first slide is just budget appropriations in terms of per level of study, the resources that we're committing to supporting postgraduate students. And then the second slide, progressively 2017 to 2020, those are the per capita values for honors, masters, and doctoral bursary support. But the message is that we're spending around 900 million rands for postgraduate student support. And the per capita values were very, very low until such time that we introduced a new policy. And yes, can you scroll down? Yeah, and then this shows of the total postgraduate enrollments out across universities out there, what is the footprint of our postgraduate support? So in 2017, we supported 9.1% of total enrolled postgraduate students. And then as you progress to 2021, that proportion has been decreasing, largely because of the introduction of full cost of funding, which actually shrunk the number of students against the rising postgraduate enrollment. So in the latest is that only DSI NRF supported 5.1% of total enrolled students. Let's scroll down. Now, from the implementation of the ministerial guidelines implemented from 2013 to 2020, we picked up a number of lessons in terms of monitoring and evaluation and policy learning. Was that the retention from honors to masters was honors masters to doctoral was very, very poor. So it wasn't, the pipeline was leaky. We're not carrying cohorts of students right through the study pipeline, but also students were taking longer to complete PhDs. The average age at completion was 39 years, but also there was something missing around the transformation imperative. In as much as we're doing well on gender and race, we had not mainstreamed the issue of socioeconomic class and financial need in our funding regime. And also we found that the bursary values that we were offering, the per capita values, were not competitive, and in fact, they were far below those offered for undergraduate studies. So there was no value proposition from a financial support perspective for students to proceed to postgraduate students. Scroll down. Now then, this is the new policy that we came up in 2020, which we started implementing in 2021. One, we wanted to fund postgraduate students without interruption, provided that they continue to do well academically, so that we can see cohorts of students that actually transact right through the study pipeline, right up to, post-PhDs. We wanted to, in order to lower the age at graduation, prioritize the funding of full-time students, but also make the bursaries commensurate with NSFAS funding. But we had to revise some of the targets that we were doing well on and set new stretch targets. For example, we had to increase the allocation of bursaries to South African citizens to 95% and only leave 5% for SADC and continental and even international students, and also just taking heed of the SADC protocol on education and training that host countries must reserve a certain proportion of funding for foreign students. So then we mainstreamed in the funding equation the issue of financial need. And the proxy for financial need was the students who received NSFAS funding at undergraduate level. So we prioritize them for full cost of study in postgraduate funding, alongside, in terms of the categories of students who qualified for full cost of study, the three categories: students with disability, academic exceptional achievers, and then those who were previously funded through NSFAS at undergraduate level. Next slide. So this is just the statement of changes from the ministerial guidelines to the new targets set on the postgraduate funding policy. To the extent that we're doing well on some targets, we had to revise them upwards. But there's one target that we're not doing well on in terms of supporting students with disability. We set initially in 2013 a target of 4%, but that target has been elusive, despite the many efforts, even in terms of providing funding for assistive device and working with offices of people with disability in universities. We barely achieved 1%. So we reduced that target to 1% going forward, just to be realistic. Thank you then. Now, this is then how we've performed against the new postgraduate funding policy. 95% of students funded should be South Africans. So in 2021, 94% were South Africans, 95%. 5% should come from SADC, international and rest of the world. 2021, 66%, 2022, 5%. Students with disability, for the first time, we were able, over the years, for the first time when we lowered the target to 1%, we were able in 2022 to meet that target of 1.5%. Thank you then. Can you move? This then is just the highlights of, the students that we support. 69, close to 70% of the students are in set STEM careers, are in set careers. 21% are in human and social sciences, and 10% in business and commerce, and then 26% in biological. And yes, next slide. This then focuses on, I think it's the recent year. I've got to remove some highlight on is the recent year 2022 academic year. It shows the total number of applications received by the NRF per level of study, and then those that were not eligible for whatever reasons, and some of them were not complete. But then there were those that were not funded owing to one reason only: budget constraints. So these are qualifying students who were not funded owing to resources limitations, and then those that were successful. So there's a huge demand for bursaries, and we have, and maybe the next two, in one slide below the next, will show, this funding shortfall. So with the introduction of the postgraduate funding policy, we increased the bursary values, and also we're adjusting them with, real inflation increases. But the reality as well is that the budget, the postgraduate budget has not been increasing in real terms. We have also a contribution from the Department of Higher Education and Training through the National Skills Fund that has been eroding over the years. And then there's an engagement that was led by the IGUSASA Student Financial Aid Program, mobilizing resources from industry partners for supporting postgraduate students and the missing middle from undergraduate studies. And that initiative was sort of derailed, by the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's move on. Now, this slide then, it shows the first part. It shows the number of students who qualified for funding, but were denied funding solely because of, the financial constraints. So you can see the huge demand from South African citizens, a relatively low demand from, South African permanent residents. But the key message here is that if we had enough resources to fund every qualifying student, we have a shortfall of 1.3 billion rands. That is to meet the needs of all the students who applied and qualified in the year 2022. Thank you. Thank you. Then we've got a number of, internal partnerships. And the objective is to give our PhD graduates a short international experience or stint abroad. So these are mobility programs that will afford our PhD funded students a stint of about 3 to 18 months of research experience abroad. And the NRF is leading engagements to increase the portfolio of these initiatives. Thank you. I think that was the last slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky, and apologies to the members for the previous technical challenges. I needed to use 2 devices to be able to see a presentation and highlight. The next part of the presentation, Chair, is on key innovation programs to boost careers in science innovation. But prior to that, I just want to highlight one issue on the previous funding, and that is that we've been making very good progress under the guidance and the leadership of the Minister in terms of our engagement with the National Skills Fund and the post-school education and training systems to find a lot more closer alignment between support that can be rendered at the postgraduate level. So some of those positive developments will be seen over the medium term in terms of the numbers that we will be able to support. But the bottom line remains that we need to raise quite a lot of funding, and that's a big focus of the department moving forward. So just in terms of the next part, which I will take a bit of, and then see if my colleague, Dr. Keshni, wants to just highlight some of the programs that we've identified for sharing that will create new careers in STEM. These are the priorities that we've identified in the decadal plan. And with the kind of support we're providing, these will become important new industries of the future. But just before that, briefly, we also play a role in doing STEM career development support through publications like the one you see there. We produce and distribute STEM career publications which target learners, parents, and educators through hard copies online, and we try to get this to as many schools in the system. A copy of this, if people are interested in their own engagements to make people aware of this publication, which we revise every so often, every 3 years, can be found at that link below. But in terms of some of the big areas, Rakeshni, are you able to talk through some of this? We thought we'll share work on our bio-innovation, energy and space programs, because these are the kind of exciting new areas that will create STEM jobs. If not, I can go through them briefly. Rakeshni, are you able to take the presentation? I'm trying to see. I saw Rakeshni. Rakeshni, are you able to talk through? Yeah, I see now you are unblocked. So you want to briefly go through the slides? Rakeshni? I'm not able to hear you, but I'm trying to just check if others are able to hear Rakeshni.
No, we cannot.
Yeah. So I thought through that. Let me do this in the interest of time. We'll move on to the presentation on sanitation, with your permission, Chair. Is Henry in the room? Henry? Or Bonani?
Both of them are not here. Perhaps I could then do the presentation quickly. Imran?
Okay, Chair, I think there's a bit of a challenge with the connectivity. So let me talk through these areas. I think members are aware that we've finalized the decadal plan on science, technology, and innovation. And some of the areas that we're identifying, there's a much longer presentation that could have been done on some of the areas, and we're not too sure if these would be of interest to the members of the select committee. But we thought we'll just lift out a few that's in our program called technology innovation. The first is we have this the bioeconomy strategy, which was finalized in 2014. Globally, it's seen as a significant contributor to GDP and could be in our country as well. We have 4 thematic areas of focus: agriculture, health, industry and environment, and very importantly, we have the IK-based technology innovation, which is already demonstrating. Each of these are extensive areas on their own. So this is, I'm not going to talk through this. This is the kind of a historical evolution. It was an area that was identified as a priority by the DSI more than 20 years ago in 2001. But the key is this vision of the bioeconomy being able to contribute 5% of GDP by 2050. And that's the core of the strategy. So some of the areas we can provide more information on this. In each of the areas of health and agriculture, we have a range of initiatives that we take forward. In terms of hydrogen and energy, I think there's been a lot in the press recently on the hydrogen economy. We finalized the hydrogen economy roadmap, but in addition to hydrogen economy, there are other areas of focus that also create opportunities for new careers in STEM, and that's alternative energy. In addition to HISA, the work that HISA is doing, we also have an energy storage program focused on lithium-ion batteries in renewables. We have the Renewable Energy Hub and Spokes program that a company has been spun out around that and has already acquired revenue of 10 million a year. And then we have, in general, other strategies in power. So these are just some examples of our work in hydrogen fuel cells, particularly the initiative that we have with Impala Platinum to use to demonstrate the importance of this technology in vehicles like forklifts. And then in terms of space science and technology, I think the minister highlighted these dedicated programs that we have, even in terms of postgraduate training in the agency, the South African Space Agency. But we have goals to be one of the leading nations in the innovative use of space science and technology to enhance economic growth and sustainable development. So in addition to the goal of creating opportunities in the manufacture of medium-sized space systems, there are also career opportunities in the application of some of these space-based technologies, whether it's things like better decision support systems. We have a range of platforms that have been developed that take space images and converts that into applications and products. We're also an active member in the global group on Earth observations, and we'll be hosting the next ministerial in Cape Town later this year. And so these are examples of applications that use space-based technologies, whether it's oil slick detection and monitoring in the oceans, harmful algal bloom, and within each of these, as I had indicated earlier, there's opportunities in the hardware side on space systems, but also in the application of some of these technologies for ocean monitoring, for land use cover, etc. So that's just a brief sense. It was a bit difficult to identify the kind of areas that would be interested in the portfolio committee on particular innovative programs that will create new careers. And therefore, we have people from our program 2 and our program 5 who can speak to other areas that we have, whether it's in sanitation, as we would go through now, or water, or ICTs, etc. So I want to see at this point in time whether we have colleagues from program 5 who can talk through the slides on the sanitation. Henry or
yes, Imran. Imran, can you hear me?
Yeah, who's this?
It's Busi.
Busi.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Busi. Yes, Busi. Are
I'm
you going to be doing the
happy-
presentation?
I'm happy to do the presentation, but I see Dr. Morphe has just joined, so let me rather hand over to him.
Thanks, Boneni.
Thanks and good morning. And apologies for joining late. I'm still at the venue where I'm having the other meeting. And I would just suggest, we'll see if you can present, because I might be having background noise issues from where I am. And hopefully by the time you finish, it will be getting clearer and quieter.
Okay, Busi, so you'll take this and also the private sector partnerships, then I'll just leave you to take us to the end of the presentation.
That's fine. Thanks, Imran. Good morning, Chair, DG, and colleagues. Imran, you're driving the presentation from your end. If you could please move on to the next slide. Okay, so the work that we do on sanitation is driven through a number of programs that are basically articulated in the RDI roadmap. So I'm going to be taking you through some of these programs, some of which involve a collaboration with the private sector, development institutions, as well as a number of government institutions as well. So the main implementing agent in this work is the Water Research Council that has been established in the case of the water technology demonstration to assist with the establishment of WADA, and so that it's able to pull together research around this work and ensure that there are partnerships that are organized around the demonstrations as well as the rollout when we get to that point. So the technologies themselves focus mainly around water treatment, alternative sources of water, and water efficiency. In terms of what is coming out of these programs by way of students, we have funded so far 59 postgraduates, 30 young engineers that have gone through the Young Engineers Changemakers program. So the Water RDI is really a driver in the sector, and it's contributing to the work of the Water and Sanitation Department through the master plan, but it's also contributing to meeting the Chapter 4 outcomes of the National Water Management Strategy. Next slide, please, Imran. Right, now, I will talk you through the South African Sanitation Technology Enterprise Program, which basically is a partnership that the Department of Science and Innovation has undertaken with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We've come together again with the WRC as the implementer, and really the idea around this program is to rejuvenate the sanitation industry in the country. So there is a very strong partnership with the private sector, and we hope that all of these innovations that emerge from the program can then be channeled to service the underserved communities, as well as the schooling community. So really the big idea here is around non-sewered off-grid sanitation technologies that offer the convenience of a flush toilet as we know it, but really requires far less resources. Next one, Imran, thank you. So this really provides a platform for commercial partners together with us as the department and the foundation to partner and see how best to service communities, but also to really begin to drive enterprises that can emerge from this industry, as I said earlier on, as part of the vision to rejuvenate the industry. Next step, Imran. Right, so the strategic partners, Department of Water and Sanitation, DBE on the school sanitation side, we're working very closely with the Department of Public Works. We have close associations with SALGA, as we have municipalities involved as one of our key partners. The presidency is there as well, and other global strategic partners. Even though the WRC is the main implementing partners, we have created a network of implementation partners, and key in this network is municipalities, as well as other bodies, including mining sector and industry players as well. Very strong inclusion of the private sector. So banks are being engaged, investors are being engaged for when we begin talking about rolling out. We can move on to the next slide, Imran. Okay, so in 2018, as you are all aware, the president put out a call to all relevant stakeholders to begin to come together and think about alternative ways to deal with the urgent challenge of sanitation in schools. And as our response to this clarion call, the department, working with the foundation and the WRC, we then came together to conceptualize a demonstration program that we would then implement in schools. Next slide, Imran. And this demonstration program resulted in a 15 million rand investment where we would demonstrate some of the technologies coming from the SASTEP program. And we selected a number of schools in the Northwest Gauteng as well as the Eastern Cape, where we would then run the demonstrations. And in the next slide, Imran, that is the list of schools where demonstrations are taking place. And those are some of the examples of the kind of technologies that we are talking about. Next one. I think this is the final slide. So just to give a sense of the numbers by way of budgets and the schooling population, the school in the Eastern Cape, as an example, the budget allocated there was 1.2 million rand, servicing 194 schools, and another school not too far from that area also servicing using a different technology, 154 learners at the cost of close to 800,000 rand. And in the Northwest, we piloted in the Direlo Farm School a clear technology that cost 3.6 million rand. So those are just the figures in terms of, you know, the kind of reach these demonstrations have had so far. And I think that is the final slide. Thank you, Imran. Okay, this is the final slide. So if you could just go back to that one. So jobs have been created through the private sector engagement and involvement, and through the schooling program as well. And so there are economic spin-offs by way of jobs and SMMEs that have benefited from the program. I think that is the last slide, if I'm not mistaken, Imran. Okay.
Thanks, Busi. Yeah, that's the last slide on the sanitation. As this was part of my old portfolio before, just one or two things that I think would be important for the to reflect on in terms of this hearing is that the demonstration work that we've identified it's not only the technology, but part of sanitation is a whole range of factors like social acceptance, operations and maintenance, etc. So there's a very strong component of monitoring and evaluation in these projects, with the idea that things that work well can then be taken forward by the departments who are responsible for large-scale rollout of the initiative. And the second is that through our work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, a big emphasis of our sanitation work is not only on the technology, but how do you create an environment, whether it's regulation or skills, etc., that will allow a new kind of sanitation technology to make sense. A lot of good technologies come short because people don't look at the holistic system around sanitation. It's not just the technology. You need to think of a lot more. It's linked to a bigger system. And so our work in sanitation as an R&D player, not as an implementing player, is to really advance the knowledge about how new sanitation possibilities can be taken forward. New sanitation that in particular have a lower water footprint, that is more convenient, that doesn't create a disease burden, etc. So that's the nature of our work in sanitation. So I thought I'll just add that on, Busi, if you're fine with that. And then let me hand over back to you to talk about how we work with the private sector, just some examples. You want to continue? Or you want one of your colleagues to come in, Sunita or
I think
Bonani?
let's go to the next slide, Imran. Sorry. So I think in terms of the work with the private sector, there are a number of initiatives, and one of them, of course, is an initiative that again was introduced during the time when DDG Imran Patel was responsible for Program 5, which is the Economic Competitiveness Support Program. And the one initiative that we want to reflect on is the Industry Innovation Partnership Program, which leveraged industry investment in RDI by stimulating increased RDI core funding. And really is looking at participation by industry players to maintain and increase their export market share, mitigating underinvestment in technology and innovation in identified and strategic sectors of the economy. Again, main issue was really to again improve the competitiveness of South African industry. And the key long-term outcomes here being increased sector contribution to GDP through stronger RDI-based industrial development. Next slide. So the one such initiative is the Sector Innovation Fund, which was really the DSI's intervention to enhance economic competitiveness of participating sectors by creating enabling environment for industry-relevant RDI priorities and exploring new approaches to fostering RDI partnerships with the private sector. And of course, that meant really building stronger links between industry and the public science system. This initiative incentivized private sector to co-invest with government in R&D activities. And then they had to come up with matching funding to really support their own activities. This initiative was managed by industry associate or bodies, and obviously we needed to look at partnering with formal bodies that represent the interest of the members, and their department really participating on relevant governance structures. The industry identifies the challenge, and the one that determines really the agenda of the focus of the work. So the objectives here was to increase the level of private sector RDI in South Africa, improving general competitiveness of the sector, increasing RDI capacity, and also human capital development. And as you probably would have seen even in the previous programs, everything that we invest on has to come with the aspect of the human capital development. Contribution to knowledge product portfolio and increased private sector involvement investment in RDI. Another critical thing, again, which is central that we always have, which include the human capital development, is aspect of transformation, and also ensuring that emerging and small players in the sector are properly supported. Next slide. So this is really just to indicate the level of investment that has occurred or that continues, because some of these programs are still running. Showing which are the industry associations we were working on, how much was the investment from the CIF fund, and how much came from the relevant associations. Next slide. So in terms of the governance, this initiative has steering committees and technical committees. The DSI is represented in each of the steering committee. And then we always make sure that there is inclusive active industry participation of partners in these committees. And of course, what is crucial is to make sure that there is also space for those that are emerging and the small players. And then we also ensure, because this currently is being implemented in the Agricultural Center, so the presence and participation by DALRAD is also quite crucial in initiatives such as Wine Tech, DFFE in those such as the ones dealing with, for example, the rooibos tea and so on, and the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. So you can begin to see that even as we implement this, the mapping is not just about ensuring private sector involvement, but also bring on board relevant government departments. Next slide. The key performance indicators, as I've indicated, human capital development, looking at number of students and interns, students who become employed as a result of being supported, and of course, scientifically, the number of publications. Issues of contribution to intellectual property portfolio, and also the knowledge or innovation products that are transferred to the participating industry partners. Transformation, knowledge products transferred to SMEs and emerging or Black farmers or Black players, proportion of Black students and interns supported, and proportion of researchers who are Black. And then in terms of improved competitiveness, we looked at cash co-funding from industry and the number of jobs created. Next slide. So this is really just a summary of contributions from or outcomes or impact from this initiative, looking at the number of students and looking at the interns and so on and so forth. So we can basically see that over the years, this project has really contributed so much to the priorities of government. Next slide. The areas of contribution, we look at improved competitiveness, key products and processes, interventions, cost savings, operational efficiencies, and in some instances, pest control and disease control. Options in terms of diversification of products and revenue generation, implementation of circular and digital economy principles, plantation management systems, resource use efficiency, climate change, and development of high-end skills in the pipeline. Next slide. And again, the increased investment in RDI, which is one of the target in terms of us really having to change and increase the investment by private sector in RDI. So in terms of SOE participation, of course, SAFCOL, the government forestry company, investment in R&D projects with private sector catalyzed through DSC. So in other words, have we not put that investment, this will not have been realized. Next slide. Case studies, I'm not going to go into detail about this. I'm just going to point out that we have seen an impact in the citrus industry with increased investment in the next slide. Next slide. Yeah, in the Cape Flora shipping sector, where the preferred mode of transportation for Cape Flora shifted from air to sea. And of course, this deals with issues of high fuel costs, carbon footprint concerns, and improvement in sea freight technology. We probably did pick up some challenges, of course, because some of the technologies were not necessarily ideal, for example, for flowers as they were developing fruit. So this really just means that even as the implementation happens, there were also a lot of opportunities for learning in the process. Next slide. In terms of the infrastructure and capability building for phenotyping and plantation tree varieties for resistance to insect, herbivores, and fungal pathogens, and this is really quite a big area of loss, especially in the forestry sector, the impact of fungus and all sorts of pests. So knowing the impact of forestry, both in terms of employment, this was really quite a huge investment and opportunity for our sector. This equated to 392 million rands of roundwood lost annually, with 2.05 billion in additional downstream processing loss. So when you develop technologies that are going to arrest these losses, for us, it's really quite important, because not only does it save the forest, it saves the economy, but it also preserves a lot of jobs. So again, this was really just in the forest sector. The other case studies are in the area of biorefinery modeling and new product development. And we all know that, for example, in the sugarcane industry, to ensure long-term sustainability, there has been a move towards diversification of products, not just being sugar, but also looking at other products. And this is really to ensure that the bioeconomy and bio-based products can actually make sure that our sector, which is quite huge, doesn't just run into losses because of this whole lot of challenges globally around the some movement away from the use of sugar, but there are a whole lot of other products that can come out, for example, your ethanol and so on and so forth. So the diversification is one such area that we look at, especially in the sugar industry. The focus on energy monitoring and online dashboard, energy to the sugar factory, for example, supplied from steam and electrical power, from steam in a complex and interactive network. You know, you got this again is to say, in that sector, you know, where do we identify areas where you can actually minimize the cost of various inputs, such as energy, and making sure that even the usage of what have been considered traditionally as waste in energy generation can actually be quite crucial in those industries. Looking at the analysis of data from 2020 to 2021, there was identified saving of between 1.9 to 9.5 million per annum in avoidable coal burn, and that's really quite significant. Next slide. I have indicated that obviously there's challenges. Sometimes uncertainties due to funding lead to trust issues between us and our stakeholders. We did, I think in the previous presentation, highlight some of the challenges that came out because of the delays in the transfer of funding, because we couldn't do that on time, as there were challenges with the transfers from Treasury. Sometimes, and as I've indicated, this started off as with a pocket of funding that is now come to an end. So there isn't really a dedicated line budget item to really support this. So this uncertainty does create a whole lot of challenges. We need to expand to other sectors that don't necessarily have RDI culture. And the expansion really would ensure that the benefits that have been reaped in the sectors that have already been supported can actually be extended to other sectors. But we do know that some of them may not necessarily have that culture of R&D. Transformation, you find that sometimes we do not have a lot of Black and small emerging players in various sectors. So that just means that if we don't have that pipeline, it actually deprives us of an opportunity to really make sure that the benefits of the program are reaped widely. And of course, the need to really contribute to knowledge product portfolio. This requires a whole lot of collaboration, especially bring on board the various HEIs in terms of early science work. Next slide. Now the next one is around the mineral extraction, research, development and innovation strategy, which is called SAMERDI. And this is really an initiative that has been established to make sure that we can maximize the sustainable returns of South Africa's mineral wealth through collaborative research, development and innovation, and implementation of mining technologies in a socially, environmentally, and financially sustainable manner. And I think this is really the key word, because now we cannot continue to do mining the way it was done decades ago. So there needs to be a lot of work that is done around the sensitivity in terms of environment, but also social awareness, and most importantly, the use of the latest technology to minimize outcome. Next slide. So SANEDI really aimed to develop technological solutions that will improve competitiveness of South African mineral sector through increased productivity, safety, and optimized use of resources, cost efficiencies, and increase of life times of the mine, because that then means that you've got continued certainty around issues such as employment and income revenue streams. The rebuilding of South Africa's RDI capacity and repositioning of the country as a top mining RDI destination. So we do know that at some point, South Africa used to be at the top in terms of development of various mining technologies, including, for example, the deep mining technologies. But we want to really rebuild and ensure that we can actually at least reach that, but then exceed the glory that we've had in the past. Supporting the capacity of local mining supply chain as partner in RDI, its ability to adequately and timelessly respond to the needs of South African mining sector. And of course, the 5 research programs of SAMERDI have been put together to look at that. This is really just to look at the budget. The budget that you see is what we have put down as a department, but it is important to know that for every single rand that the department put, there was an equivalent 50 cents that came from the private sector. So that is really quite an investment, even though with time we would expect that the investment from the private sector is going to be much higher than our investment. But we needed to provide this seeding in order for this research initiative to be realized. Next slide. So the research programs, as I've indicated, is about the longevity of current mines, mechanized mining systems. How do we make sure that we've got a vibrant and well-developed machining and equipment sector in South Africa? Advanced ore body knowledge. This is really to make sure that a lot will get the most out of the ore. So you then, through that knowledge of your ore, you can actually extract the maximum possible that you require from that particular ore. Real-time information management system. This is really to develop and implement smart connected systems for mining from sensor to dashboard. And again, as I said, the use of technologies, especially AI technologies, being able to predict and to understand sometimes when certain disasters are about to happen and how you can mitigate that. And then lastly, successful application of technologies centered around people. And ultimately, I think being able to realize that mining is not just about machine and the ore body, but it is also about people. So this is really the focus of this SMRE program. Next slide. These are some of the outcomes in terms of the launch of the Mandela Mining Precinct, which showcased better rock drills for uptake by South African mines. The diamond wire cutting test, which were completed successfully. People-centered industrial guidelines, which are beginning to come up with models, for example, of how can, in an event, for example, of an accident underground, how should miners respond and where do they go and how do they navigate underground? The 4R needs in mining, and as I've indicated, the use of technologies. There are a lot of virtual reality initiatives that are aimed at training miners in terms of what to do when you are faced with a particular situation and you're underground. Next slide. Again, this is really just showing some of the partners that we have, and I'm not going to go into detail into that slide, but I think it's fair to report that while this is really just one of those new initiatives, it's beginning to show that the partnership between government, private sector, and also the other stakeholders, it's really quite crucial in rebuilding our sector. Next slide. So thanks very much. I think this is really just a summary in terms of the inputs. I have got colleagues who are on board here who will probably be able to deal with the questions and also to provide clarification where some might have not been properly covered. And again, I'm pleased to also have Imran here leading our delegation, because he has also led some of these initiatives for the better part of the couple of years that they were being implemented. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dr. Moafe. So, Chair and members, that's our presentation. We did struggle to decide what to include and not, and you can see there's a lot of detail on many of the projects, and there's many things that we couldn't cover in terms of other types of engagements with the private sector, or some of our engagements with the other innovation programs, etc. So we'll be we have a team that's working on different parts of this work, and we're ready to take any questions and comments and suggestions as part of that. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks a lot, DG. Thanks for this insightful presentations. They are giving hope that we are engaging the challenges that are facing the country in terms of technology, and that the research that is being done addressing serious issues that are facing South Africa and South Africans, and that these innovations will add an impact on the development of the economy. South Africa, as we know, honorable members, it's a water scarce. We are living in it's a water scarce country, and that every drop counts. I'm in Polokwane, as I'm talking to you. I'm connecting from my brother's house. They have a swimming pool that they were getting water from the borehole. And as from last week, they tried to pump and water is not coming out. And what they are doing, they're going to close that swimming pool and use the water to irrigate their garden. But that, the kind of research that are happening in this shows that we will definitely solve these problems of shortages. And part of the shortages of water, the little water that we get gets contaminated by sanitation. We're talking about school sanitation, but this research and the technologies in sanitation, what we're inventing, they will help actually in improving water quality. and increase the amount of water that can be used for human consumption, of course, and animals. Like I know in areas, let's say around Limpopo and Ramutiva and the eastern side of Polokwane, when it rains, when we have rains, the water in the pit latrines will rise without water going in through the roofs and all that. But because the groundwater table is shallow, it's closer. When it rains, the water rises. And then after some time, after 3 weeks, that water will go down and you wonder, where did the water go? It went into the aquifers. And actually what it means is that what we drop in the pit this year will end up in our temps in summer when it rains. So coming up with technologies to deal with sanitation will release lots of water for human consumption. But the other things I like to check is, with all these innovations that we are getting, that we are discovering through our research, who are implementing agents for these things? You know, sometimes people will discover best technology, and then you partner with companies from outside. That's disadvantaging South Africans, or South Africans come into play as into the business as junior partners, or do very minimal production to serve to on that project, when most of the things will be done by companies outside. How do we ensure that what we do actually generate jobs for South Africans? Honorable members, that's the presentation of the Department of Science and Innovation. This is a presentation of hope. Let us engage. I'm going to look at our system here. I see the hand of Honorable Tuli, followed by Honorable Christians. Yeah, I'll give over to the members. And yeah, Honorable, the floor is yours, ma'am. Mazandon.
Thank you, Chairperson, and greetings to everyone. Apologies, Chairperson, for not switching on my camera. I was moving from home to another place because we have load shedding. So I was still on the road, so I decided to park on the street. So if you will allow me to speak without my camera on.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I have 2 questions. Chairperson, on slide 24, we have noted that fuel cell powered Fort League launched in Impala Platinum refineries in March 2016. Can the department please share an update on the fuel cell powered flow lift, and elaborate on related or link initiative to be launched as a spin-off from 2016 launch? And my last question, Chairperson, is on slide 16. Strategy to raise private sector funding with ISFAP was affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. This initiative has been resuscitated. Can the department please elaborate on this strategy and share case studies, example of the impacts achieved since it has been resuscitated? Thank you.
Thanks, Honorable Tuli. Honorable Christians, your floor.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much, Chairperson. To the department, can you please tell us about the collaboration with the entities and agencies, science councils that have been listed to leverage their expertise and resources in addressing the challenges of pit latrines and sanitations in schools? So I just want to know a little bit more about the collaboration between these entities, agencies, and science councils that the department has with them. And then what challenges is the department facing in accessing additional funding and support from corporates? Because I think that, you know, the department has spoken at length about additional funding and the collaboration with corporates, but are there any challenges faced with these large donors in terms of research and innovation projects, specifically in addressing issues of pit latrines and sanitation in schools? And then how does the department actively engage corporates and potential donors to raise awareness, specifically again in investing in research and innovation, and also referring, of course, again to pit latrines and sanitation in schools? Then how does the department plan to evaluate the effectiveness and impact of its intervention in eradicating these pit latrines and improving the sanitation in schools? In other words, are there any specific metrics or indicators that the department is using to evaluate the effectiveness and the impact of its interventions? With regard to the scholarships, what are the eligibility criteria and the application process for the freestanding scholarships that the department is offering? And how does the department ensure equity and inclusivity in the allocation of scholarships and fellowships? If the department can please elaborate a little bit more on, you know, the equity and the inclusivity, particularly for students with disabilities on the one side, but also can the department go into a little bit more detail with regard to all of the underrepresented backgrounds? Because the department makes specific reference to one underrepresented background, but what is the exact breakdown of the equity and inclusivity of these scholarships and fellowships, both in the past and going forward? Then could the department provide us more information about the collaboration and the agreements between the department and the provincial departments of education to provide the STEM-I subjects with specific initiatives? In other words, what specific initiatives are being implemented in schools with regards to this? And then just lastly, can the department also elaborate on what and how they are going about training officials from the education districts on coding? How does this initiative align, in other words, with the introduction of coding and robotics in schools by the Department of Basic Education? I just have a last question about the flush toilets for the department. Now, what are the department's plans for scaling up the adoption of eco-friendly sanitation technologies, such as easy flush toilets, and also that clear recirculation toilet system? And how will the involvement of district municipalities be ensured in these initiatives? How will that collaboration between district municipalities take place? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Sanitation is linked to water. And I just want to check on how does this information, your research, feed into the Department of Water Affairs? And how does that also, does that information lead to behavioral change in the department? And the others also, it's for water harvesting, there's very poor maintenance of catchment areas of rivers and dams. And if we don't address those things, we'll never be able to address the issues relating to water shortage and scarcity. There are other hands in the group. I see the hand of Honorable her hand fell off. There was
It was my hand, Chair.
Ndongeni,
It was
yeah, Honorable
Ndongeni's
Ndongeni. And then you'll be followed by Ntube if you still have a question.
All right, thank you, Chair. On slide 4 notes, the inter-program bursary scheme was founded in 2015 and 16, and as a current undergoing a 5-year review, and it supports less than 350 postgraduate students compared to about 6,400 students supported by the NRF. Can it please the department update on the review of highlighting the key success and the challenges of the IPS as achieved during the 5-year period? The second one, on slide 5 notes, provision of research equipment. Please provide a breakdown on the research equipment in terms of the province and the impact achieved on SI directly due to the specific equipment being available in the specific province. The last one, on slide 7, SA Black female postgraduate students supported 2017 noted that 13,559 total students. The total reduced to 7,732 in 2021. On the other hand, slide 7 notes that SA Black student increased from 70% in 2017 to 81% in 2021. On slide 19 notes, NRF fund a proportion of the national cohort of postgraduate students. The number of students from 2017 to 2021 who were supported by the NRF and IPS is presented on slide 9. Understanding the presentation on slide 4 notes that, assuming for 2023, about 6,400 students are supported by the NRF and less than 350 by the IPS. This indicates that there is a declining trend in the percentage of the students being funded by the NRF. It is acknowledged that slide 17 notes the National Skills Fund budget allocation has been declining over the years from 250 million in 2016-17 to 151 million in 2021-22. Can the department please elaborate on the details of the declining in terms of the impact of specific program and qualifications supported by the NRF, and elaborate in the declining is also evident for the IPS. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Ntube, it's your turn.
Yes, no, so thank you very much, Chairperson. And let me appreciate the report, the presentation, rather than say that I think it's detailed. But I have been to a certain extent covered by previous members who spoke, Chair. I just want to say, Chair, that on slide 17, there's an indication that there were students that were qualifying. However, there was a budget constraints. I saw that out of 7,225 applications from honors to doctorate, only 5,910 were catered for. So I just wanted to check what will happen to the 1,315 applications, if maybe there will be a catered chairperson in the 2023 academic year, since they fell off from the 2022 academic year chairperson. In relation to the key innovation program, Boost Careers in Science and Innovation chairperson, I just want to check in relation to the hydrogen and energy. What are some of the technological capabilities that department have deployed in ESCOM to resolve the imminent challenge of load shedding? Faithfully, chairperson, it's in relation to the stakeholders I think is the, I can't remember the slide program, but I want to check what or who are the strategic global partners, if this information, Chair, can be shared to the benefit of the committee and the public at large. And ask the last question, Chairperson, that what is the relationship of Gates and the department, Gates Foundation and the department, if there are funding programs in relation to maybe policy-wise, Chairperson, they can influence or what? We want to try to get the sense of their relationship with the department and the drive of SUSTEP. And say, Chairperson, to the minister that I strongly feel that we are not doing justice to this department by the budget that we are allocating to it. I think that the state must always be at the center of research and innovation for the development of our people, so that we are able to deploy serious innovation in schools like this one of SUSTEP, probably at the disadvantaged communities, for the betterment of our people at large, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Is there another hand that does not appear on my list? Any other comment from the members? I just want to check, DG. We're doing research sometimes that benefits certain companies directly, like with the fuel stem, something with the forklift. How much are they contributing? I'm not asking about an actual amount. I'm saying that are these companies really contributing towards some of these researchers, of which they are direct beneficiaries, very immediate beneficiaries to this? In the presentations, I saw there was something about making bricks from urine. I'll be very angry when somebody pees on the bricks before I build my house, because usually the smell of urine gets contained. It stays for a long time on the bricks. You build with bricks that were peed on, they smell in the house. I just want to check if maybe did I make a mistake? I didn't see this thing very well. DG, let's giving over to you, the department, to respond to these questions. Over to you, DG.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be leading as the DDG. I think the DG is also committed elsewhere. So with your permission, we had agreed that I would lead. So I want to ask, I'll come back to this question that you've raised about the implementers of innovation and companies and local. And I'll ask some of my colleagues to also reflect on that question. But just from my side, it depends very much on the area of focus. There's many different types of partnerships we have, and each area, because each area, for example, fuel cells is very different from mining, as an example, the one that we presented today. And the kind of companies that we would interact with, whether it's local, so let me switch on my camera. The types of companies we engage with will depend on the area of focus. In some instances, we have to work with international because these are technologically advanced areas, and through technology transfer agreements and other partnerships that we bring technologies through. So there's a lot of variation in the type of partnerships we have, but as a department, we're committed to, as far as possible, to ensure that there's strong localization, etc. So it's a very strategic decision we take when we look at a particular project area and then have to decide, do we engage with international partners? Do we engage with local businesses? Local businesses obviously are the priority, but we would have to, in some areas, we would only be able to advance by partnering with other countries. And then when we do partner, we try to ensure that we protect the interests of South Africa as much as possible. But I'll ask others who work in different areas to maybe give examples of this question you posed about how do we work with the private sector, which I think is a very, very important question. Then if Rakeshni can or Boneni, because this was part of Boneni's portfolio before, around an update on the forklift partnership that we have, and do we have any other partnerships that we'll be launching in the fuel cell space? And then I'll ask Becky to reflect on a whole range of questions, issues, including the ISFAP partnership that we have, the National Skills Fund, which I partially addressed, that we are engaging with them, continue to do that. And then I think the questions around this balance between the IBS, the interbursary scheme, and the NRF. And I think, again, the question of why have we reduced the numbers, if you can talk to some of those areas. I'm just trying to see. And then obviously there were some questions around broader eligibility criteria around scholarships and those things. If you can take those, that would be appreciated. And then Dr. Manzini, I'm not too sure if you can talk to, I can do that as well. Just some of the collaboration with provincial departments around STEM and training officials in coding. Some examples of that interaction. And then Boneni, if I don't know if you want to come in to talk about the whole sanitation space and how we engaging with partners, how do we evaluate the impact of our work there, and how do we plan to scale up some of the ecological friendly technologies that we're supporting through our efforts around that. And then I'll just see whether there's any missing questions, and I can pick those things up as others talk. So if I can ask Becky to come in, because there were a lot of questions around the scholarship, and Chair, we have a senior colleague from I saw earlier on the platform from the NRF, Dr. Eugene Lottering, who works very closely with us strategically and at the implementation level around the whole challenge on high-level human capital development. And I'll provide an opportunity for Eugene to make any comments that he'd like to make on some of the questions posed by the honorable members. So can we go in that order, Becky, and then see if Rakeshni wants to come in around the fuel cell work, and then Boneni around some of the questions on sanitation, etc. And then I'll see what's remaining behind to address. Becky, do you want to come in first? I'll switch off my mic, my camera and mic.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the first question from Honorable Luchuli, slide 16 is FAP, and the interruption that was brought up by the advent of COVID, is that the NRF actually was able to sign the memorandum of agreement with SFAP. And then there have been funds raised to support master students. Actually, the figure that I have here, in one partnership, 8 master students have been funded, but also there is with SOSAL, a total investment of 26 million rands was leveraged. It's a rand for rand contribution run by the private sector and a rand by the NRF. But further, even going internationally, there was an MOU signed with the German Academic Exchange Program, in which 30.3 million rands was raised. So it's an ongoing initiative in terms of trying to make inroads, into the private sector to leverage postgraduate funding. Then there's a question by Honorable Christian. It pertains to the inclusivity and equity issues in terms of awarding students. I think at the highest level, the issue of excellence, academic performance, it's a key driver. But what happens is that it's the universities who actually make nominations for students who qualify. Why the universities? It's because then the NRF did not want to replicate, the instrument of the means test. They did not want, they were leveraging on, the expertise that already is with the universities in terms of determining who qualifies for NSFAS, who is the student who is needy in terms of funding. So then the universities will prioritize who are the financially needy students, and they make block nominations to the NRF. And then the NRF, based on a number of criteria, academic excellence, it's gender, it's race, disciplinary spread, is the relevance of research, is the institutional spread in terms of also affording that certain, historically disadvantaged institutions get a fair share of their students to be supported. And this has worked very well, because I can tell you that we're exceeding our Black and women targets consistently. We've done that at lower postgraduate level. It's only recently in the year 2021 that we started exceeding, the Black and women targets, even at PhD at PhD level. Then in terms of, for example, the equity socioeconomic class, there is a slide actually that was showing, and the minister mentioned this, that about 70% of the students that we fund, we're funding them at full cost. And most of those students funded at full cost are students who would have received undergraduate funding through NSFAS. Now, the IBS program, in terms of what are the successes and the challenges, I was tempted to say it's too early to tell, because we're finalizing the evaluation process. But I can tell you anecdotally that, to the extent that these are small numbers of students, there are lots of innovations and experimentation that you wouldn't probably have the privilege of trying out with bigger numbers like the NRF is supporting. The CSIR and the SANZA, and they've got a lot of what they call wraparound strategies. So it's not about throwing money at the students, but it's also consistent support to ensure that, students succeed at the end of the funding period. So there's emerging data on, the better and faster completion rate among those students, but more is going to be revealed by the evaluation study. But also these are students who are trained in dedicated research development and innovation platforms. So after the training, they get into this research development innovation platforms, whether it's space science, whether it's advanced manufacturing, whether it's ICT. So I suspect that there will be something positive in terms of because the absorption into the immediate, environment where they do their research to satisfy, their acquiring of qualifications. Then there's the issue of the numbers that are declining. Probably about 3 explanations. You would have seen that the National Skills Funding contribution decreased by about 100 million, 27 to 2021. But also, when we introduced the postgraduate funding policy with full cost of funding for certain categories of students. So when we introduced it progressively for first-year masters, it reduced the numbers. And we introduced it for second-year masters, or even when we introduced for first-year PhDs and migrating into, the introduction of it for second PhD students, it actually decreases, the number of students that are funded. So the declines are partly explained, by those 2 factors. But also, one other thing that I did not highlight during the presentation is that from the advent of COVID and the interruptions that it revisited, to the system, we started introducing extension support for masters and for PhD students. So there were interruptions in terms of students not doing or completing their fieldwork in time. So some of the students then were able to motivate for a 6 months extension. If you're funded, if you are doing your master's, you're funded for 2 years regulation time. But then because of the interruption, then you can motivate for 6 months or even 1 year extension, similarly as well with the PhD. So that has worked very well in terms of us harvesting, our initial investments that we would have made to students. Now, what would happen to the students that were not funded? The NRF does not capture this database for invoking the following year. So next year, a new call will be put out and the same students would have to apply. But what we did then, working with the DHET, we are finalizing this holistic framework for student support, inclusive of both undergraduate and postgraduate students. So holistic framework for student support across the board. We made a cabinet memo and presented that cabinet memo to in August last year. It's part of also the initiative aimed at addressing how we fund the missing middle. And as I said, it also includes proposal for postgraduate funding. So it's partly the DHET's leading engagements in that regard, in terms of engaging the private sector, in terms of private sector, particularly financial institutions, for the provision of soft loans of some type for qualifying students. And those soft loans could be underwritten by government, but it's a set of, a whole range of proposals in terms of addressing the missing middle, but also ramping up support for postgraduate students. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. I'm not too sure if Dr. Manzini or Dr. Lottering want to just make any additional comments on the questions around student funding. Let me just quickly check. Dr. Manzini, any question, any comments?
Thank you. I'll just comment on the questions regarding the work we do at school level. There's so much work that we do. It is not possible to cover in a short amount of time. I'll just touch on some of the headlines. We work very closely, Honorable Chair and members, with the Department of Basic Education. Our collaboration has started in 2004, and we work on a number of fronts, including with the provincial departments of education. In fact, we've got agreements that provide structure to the kinds of initiatives that we partner in. Just a few of those include the work that we do in relation to Science Expose and Mathematics Olympiads, Technology and Innovation Expose. And these are broad-based initiatives that reach hundreds of thousands of learners every year. They are meant to inculcate many important skills that are required for the future. Another area where we partner with the departments of education, we touched on this in the presentation, around science awareness and science engagement, We reach many schools, also through the National Science Week, which we run every year in first week of August. And many schools are involved in this. In terms of curriculum support, we run a number of initiatives. We've got science centers spread out throughout the country in all 9 provinces. And many of these science centers, they host laboratories which enable learners from the disadvantaged schools who do not have laboratories. They are able to go into these science centers and they are assisted to perform science experiments that they may not be exposed to in their schools. This is just one of many initiatives on that score. There was a question regarding robotics. We've introduced a program last year, and we want to expand it rapidly, where we train selected officials. For a start, we are looking at officials at district level, school management teams, and other participants at school level who can go on training in coding and robotics so that they can train others so that the program can grow and multiply exponentially. So this is just one of those important skills for the future that we are introducing in the schools. This is just just some highlights of a lot of work that we do, and much of this work is done through the National Research Foundation, through SASTA within the NRF. Thank you, Imran.
Thanks, Dr. Manzini. Any final comments, Dr. Lottering, that you would like to make, or some key issues to highlight?
Yes, I would. Thanks, Imran. I'm on the implementation side of things. I'm not part of government. And so the big plea that I want to make is that the science system works and we can develop our science system to a much higher and greater level with additional funding. It is very heart-wrenching for us to turn away students who qualify to study science. And yet we spend our time promoting science to the students through our science advancement organization called SASTA. And so from our perspective, the 1.3 billion shortage in student funding is something that desperately needs to be addressed, because we as a nation are using science and engineering as a driver for economic development. So we need as many of the scientists that we can afford and put into the system. Thank you.
Thanks, Eugene. I think Rakesh was trying to call me, so I'll just call her back to find out if she's able to respond. But maybe I can move on to Dr. Moise.
Imran, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, brilliant. I have Cosmos. It will be answering the questions on the hydrogen fuel cells and the forklift technologies that we are initiating through the HISAT. Cosmos?
Thank you for the opportunity. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we can, Cosmos.
Okay. Yeah. Just from the question that I got through DDG, We are indeed supporting a number of fuel cell related projects in a number of areas. On the mobility side, other than the forklift that we did with Impala Platinum, we also collaborated with the South African Post Office to use hydrogen fuel cells to extend the battery, the range that was previously achieved just using batteries. So the fuel cell acts as an onboard charging mechanism, and therefore the scooter is able to travel 3 times the previous range or distance. So that's one project. The other one that we are also doing on the stationary fuel cell side is we have got a project in the Masia village in Vembe in Limpopo, where we are trying to use fuel cells to assist the community to preserve agricultural products that are produced in the area, as well as another fuel cell deployment that we are installing at Mintech, and that would also assist the Department of Home Affairs, which is neighboring the Mintech campus, to also use that energy for their ICT equipment. The third project is where we are looking at installation of a fuel cell at the DMRE building in Pretoria. And that unit has already been put on the ground. They're just doing the finishing touches. And last but not least, we have got another project earmarked for Eastern Cape at a police station in Bizana. It's also going to be a fuel cell that is going to assist the police station with their power challenges, but particularly during times of load shedding. So maybe let me stop there, unless there are specific follow-up questions again on the projects. But these are projects that we are targeting for this current financial year.
Thanks, Cosmas, for also joining at short notice. I think the one specific question was that on the fuel cell forklift project with Impala, what's the update on that? Because it was in 2016 that we had the partnership. My understanding is that that partnership has concluded, but maybe you can give an update on that. And then thanks for the other examples of where we're testing fuel cells.
Yeah, thank you, DDG. The partnership still exists with Impala. We continue to run the fuel cell through our center that is based at the University of the Western Cape. So they provide the maintenance and support for that project, and that forklift is still working as part of their refinery operations. The center is also produced another forklift where they've actually optimized the engine and actually integrated the hydrogen tanks. So that module is almost like a plug and play that is targeted for other forklift applications. The challenge that we have, as much as we have collected a lot of data, we still have issues of cost. That's why there's very little uptake from the private sector. But recent engagements with the private sector is actually showing that we are now moving to a point where they are willing to pay the price differential to adopt some of these technologies.
Thanks, Cosmas. And I think you've also addressed in part one of the questions about fuel cells in relation to the ESCOM load shedding challenges that we face at the moment.
There was just a little bit. There was also a truck in Limpopo. I think it was in one of the platinum mines, which was fueled by, is it? Yeah, I think it was launched about 2 years ago. Yeah, hydrogen.
I could add a bit on that. Shall I go ahead?
Yes, you may, Cosmas, briefly.
Yes. So this is actually a very tangible case study of how this hydrogen and fuel cell combined with batteries can actually be deployed at an industrial level scale, because what we have on that truck is a 2 megawatt power requirement that is being met by a combination of a fuel cell and batteries. So 1.2 megawatts of that power requirement is through batteries, and then an 800 kilowatt fuel cell is being used. And that is already part of the what we call the Platinum Valley Initiative that starts from Limpopo, going all the way to Durban. And we are targeting to use fuel cells in heavy duty trucks to convert them from diesel to hydrogen power. Thanks.
Thanks, Cosmos. Okay, so maybe we can move on to the questions around sanitation. Boneni, do you want to come in, or someone from your team?
Thanks, Imran. I think I will probably start off. The one question that I would like to address as Vusi is preparing to respond relates to the uptake and massification of these initiatives. Our main focus and responsibility is really to demonstrate that a particular technology works, so that those who are in the relevant line departments or in the relevant industry can actually then take those technologies off, either for massified implementation or for commercialization. So we therefore would not necessarily then, for example, after demonstrating that a specific sanitation technology works, that we wouldn't have the resources to then go and implement it, say, at municipal or whatever level. So that's really the one point I want to make. And the same thing that goes with the presentation that was done by the colleagues around the fuel cells. So we have been able to demonstrate, for example, that you can actually implement this in forklifts, and you can do that in trucks and so on. But the actual take up then relies on those that are involved, like the amplats and so on and so forth. We have, for example, just during COVID, had the one military hospital's COVID section being powered fully by fuel cells with ESCOM power as a backup. So that was really just to prove that in terms of implementation, these technologies can be done. So I think just to really go into the details of the actual projects in the sanitation side, I'm going to hand over to Vusi to provide some responses.
Thanks, DDG. Starting with the first question on the implementing agent for SASTEP. The Water Research Commission is the implementing agent, but the program is a collaborative effort that draws in a number of stakeholders. You will recall from the slide on the stakeholder map that it's quite a huge range, including national as well as local government, and of course the private sector. And the private sector has an interest in two ways. Firstly, as a provider in the market of the solutions. So they are a critical player that is a partner in the program, but also there is potential for CSI funding, just to address the issue around funding from the private sector, particularly for rolling out in public schools. Now, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is our strategic partner, which means that we have their expertise on board, but we can also tap into their networks. But more importantly, they are a co-funder. So the 15 million rand pot for the demonstration that I was talking about was partly from the contribution of the Melinda and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So in terms of evaluating the outcomes and impact, so the evaluation process is ongoing. So we are looking at both formative and summative evaluations as methodologies. And as the DDG was saying, the idea really is to look at a number of areas, not just the technical side of it, but user acceptability, and most importantly, how this then feeds into policy and programs of government. And there was a question around the involvement of the Department of Water and Sanitation. They are definitely one of the partners, and the master plan of the department also articulates this work in some form or another. So they are definitely a very important stakeholder that is being engaged in the process of the work that we are doing. The question around scaling up has already been addressed. Imran, I think that I've covered everything from those questions, unless I've left anything out.
No, thanks. You also dealt with a question that I thought I would talk to, but that's great around water and sanitation, etc. So Chair, just to reinforce a few messages. One is that we needed to make strategic decisions around the postgraduate funding. And this was not based on, it was based on very detailed reflection and analysis that was done on how best to ensure that we can maximize the impact of our funding on postgraduate funding. And that led to the need for the full cost model, even from an equity perspective. We think we have all of that in place, and wherever we go, and that's why Dr. Lottering has said, wherever we go, we make the plea for increased funding. And hopefully there will be a build-up and things would start materializing. But in addition to that, we are having very, very good engagements. And as I had mentioned earlier, the close interaction between ourselves and the Department of Higher Education and Training is on a daily basis strengthening and improving. As you could see over the last few days, there was a very specific workshop to look at how is it that the post-school education and training system can support the innovation system with respect to hydrogen fuel cells. So we're building on all of those momentum. And I'm quite confident that, with our continued pleading for more funding and the action that we're taking on the ground by linking up with the NSF and the CETAs and private business, etc., that we would continue to make incremental gains and improvements in terms of what we do and support, and hopefully get closer, if not completely, to that target that any deserving student will receive funding, and not the case where if you have all of everything else and you're deserving, that you're not able to have funding. But it is a challenge, and it's a very core one that we're focusing on. And then the second point I wanted to reinforce was what came through very clearly, and is to address the NCOP on this because of your very close provincial footprint, and as you had indicated in your opening remarks, Chair, that you can take forward some of the things you learn in your own engagements with communities, etc., with provincial governments. But on all of these areas, technology is sometimes a difficult part, but sometimes it's the easier part. Getting it implemented in a system is sometimes the difficult part. And over many years, we use the word demonstration loosely, but it's not simply demonstration. It's demonstration as well as creating an enabling environment for that innovation to be taken up more effectively. And this means, for example, in the sanitation space, we needed to work very closely with the South African Bureau of Standards at one point in time to look at the standards for non-sewered sanitation. The existing standards would have killed a lot of innovation because they were not appropriate for the time. And then there's issues of user acceptability, how you plug in these technologies into a broader system, etc. So as we implement the white paper and with its focus on impact, we are partnering very closely with all of the other agencies who can make or break an innovation to just make sure that they are working with us all of the time, and so that these kinds of opportunities that are possible are not blocked because, you know, something like a standard or regulation or whatever. And we think we're getting better at that. And then finally, to conclude this question that I think, Chair, you asked and some other members asked around global partners and the private sector, is to reinforce the view that, you know, it's not possible to give a standard answer. It depends very much on the sector. You know, certain mature sectors that we spoke about, for example, like forestry, it's a mature sector. It's got a particular industry structure, etc. And therefore, when we work with that sector, we work with mainly local players. But in the fuel cell space, we need to tap into global markets. So it makes sense to also partner at this early stage with international players, so that if we do have export ambitions, that it opens up there. So the discussion around the sectors and the partners that we use, the simple answer is that it very much depends on the field that we're focusing on. Hydrogen will have a different footprint to sanitation, to mining, to forestry, to agriculture, etc. But we are guided by the need that we need to do a lot more to strengthen local businesses. And some of the initiatives we have in this regard, which we didn't even include in the presentation, is we have initiatives like the Technology Stations Program or the Technology Localization Implementation Unit. And those are all aimed at strengthening the ability of local businesses to be able to be more effective players in the science and technology space. And it also includes things like an R&D tax incentive. So there's quite a lot happening in that space that we obviously, it's a requirement for us to look back at those and say, is it effective enough or not? And if it's not effective, can we improve? But there's a lot happening in that space between DSI and the private sector, and increasing. In fact, there will be a series of strategic engagements with people who finance, the banks and venture capital, not only players like manufacturers or forestry players. So this is the challenge of our time, is to begin to really develop and strengthen that partnership. And it's part of the philosophy of the decadal plan, is about partnerships to get us to where we want to get to. So on that basis, Chair, I hope I've addressed, the team and myself have managed to address all of the questions that were posed. But if there were any that we didn't satisfactorily answer, we're always willing to provide more information and more explanation. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, DDG. And that will be, we are at the end of our question and answer, because we have another meeting continuing with the committee. If there are answers or questions that members feel that they were not dealt with, that they want more detail, we can communicate that in writing to your own selves. And thank you very much for responding and for attending this meeting and responding with such detail to our questions. And of course, the presentations were very useful and and very informative. Thank you very much. Do you have some few last word, DG, to say before we release you and the team?
No, nothing from my side. I don't know if the DG is still on the platform. I don't see him there, but thanks. We always find these engagements with the select committee and the portfolio committee very useful because it gives us a sense of what are the priorities and the focus of the legislature or the elected representatives that we need to factor into as a bureaucracy and an administration. And we value that, and we also value the support expressed by all of the members for the DSI's profile and budget to increase. We really appreciate that. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks a lot. You and your team can leave the meeting, and then members. Noltando, may you flag the minutes of the last meeting. I suggest we deal with the minutes and then deal with the reports later.
All right, Chair.
Minutes. Yeah, that's minutes of the 31st of May. Any comments, any matters arising from the minutes? And if there is none, if there's none, can there be any mover for adoption of this minutes? If there are no comments or corrections, can we have a mover for adoption of this minutes? So we're not going to adopt this minute. Is there a mover for adoption of this minutes?
Chairperson. Chair.
Hello? Yes.
It's of course, I move for the adoption of the minutes as true reflection. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Is there any second?
I second the chairperson.
Thank you very much. Is there another set of minutes, and Oltando, should we move to the report?
There's no other set of minutes, Chair. We can move to the report.
Yeah, may you flag the report? Yeah, this is a draft report of the Select Committee on Education and Technology, Sports, Arts and Culture on budget vote 35, Science and Innovation, dated 13th of June, 2023. We have had this report with us for quite some time, honorable members. Yeah, I'll read the last line. Having satisfied itself in its engagement with the Department of Science and Innovation on the annual performance plan and budget, the Select Committee on Education and Technology, Sports and Culture recommends that vote 35, Science and Innovation, be adopted, and that the House approves. No, this report is for our consideration, let me say. So what we do, Noltando, with this report, we considering it. What does that mean?
It's for adoption, Chair, by the committee.
For adoption by the committee, yes, that is what I wanted, exactly that. Any comment on this? If there is none, can we have any move of adoption of this report? Yes. Any move for adoption of this report?
Yes.
Any move for adoption of this report?
I move for the adoption of the report, Chair.
Honorable Ngozi moves. Thank you. Any seconder? Any seconder? Into a second. Thank you very much. All members, please, let's not take long because we don't have time for this. Committee secretary, is there any another? There's another one. Draft report of the Select Committee on Education and Technology, Sports, Arts and Culture on budget vote 37. Sports, Arts and Culture dated today, that is the 14th of June, 2023. That's the report. We have had it for quite some days. wonder why people take such a long time. Thank you. That's the report. We have had this report for quite some days, honorable members. Is there any mover for adoption of this report?
Nzube moves to adopt, Chairperson.
Nzube moves. Any seconder? Thanks, Honorable Nzube. Any seconder?
A second, Chair.
Who is seconding?
Honorable Nkosi.
Honorable Nkosi second. Thank you very much. Do you have another report?
No, Chair. We are done now, Chair.
We are done. Okay, thank you, honorable members, for your attendance and participation in this meeting. It's important that when we ask questions for adoption, that, or even, the agenda and all this, I don't have to raise my voice asking people to do this. Please let us be alert all the time in our meetings. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.